Welcome back to another episode of Excuse My Grandma. It's Kim and my co-host,
Grandma Gail. Today we have one of my favorite stars because I was an absolute tremendous fan of The Sopranos, and even though he was in many other things and he's in many now, including Blue Bloods, that was my favorite program for many seasons. Steve Schirripa is just a superman, enjoyable to talk to, and I even saw him on Bobby Flay-Kim. He was a heckler on one of his cooking shows recently. This season, and he's just because he loves food, he loves to go to good restaurants, and he's such an all-around man that he's fun to talk to. I'm looking forward to it.
And the show is obviously available to stream on HBO, so more and more people have been watching it. I obviously didn't watch it when it first came out 15 years ago, but now that it's available to stream, I'm definitely gonna binge it. I've just only seen a few episodes at this point.
And he's got a great book out discussing each episode, which, of course, has risen to the New York Times bestseller.
Super exciting. I think people just love mob movies and mob TV shows.
It's part of Americana. It's something that is really it's fun, and people vicariously. I don't know what they think about. They might think about putting themselves in those crazy situations, but he really is a wonderful actor, and I'm looking forward to hearing from him.
We are joined by Steve Schirripa. He's well known for being an amazing actor, and his most famous role is being Bobby Bacala on The Sopranos on HBO, and now in 2021, he's the co-author of the book Woke Up This Morning, along with Michael Imperioli, which came out earlier in November. And the two of them also have a podcast together called Talking Sopranos. Steve, welcome to Excuse Me, Grandma.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
I'm a big fan.
Introduce yourself and your marital status and where you're from.
So I'm Steve Schirripa. Most people know me from The Sopranos, Bobby Bacala, but I also was a series regular on The Secret Life of the American Teenager with Shailene Woodley, who's now a big star. She was 16 then, and Molly Ringwald. I'm currently on Blue Bloods since 2015. I am married for 32 years to my wife, Laura. I have two daughters, 29, going to be 30 in a month. And then I have a 26-year-old, two daughters. They both graduated the University of Delaware. And then my youngest one got her master's at Hunter. She's a school counselor.
Amazing. Well, I want to know how involved you are in their dating life and all of that, but we'll get to that later. First, let's talk The Sopranos. It premiered more than 2 decades ago. It's been off the air for 15 years. Is that like crazy to hear? And what was your experience being on such an iconic television show?
You know, it is crazy to hear that here we are, 15 years after the last show, people are still watching it. People your age are watching it, teens. We found that out, especially with the podcast, because it's younger people listen to podcasts, right? I've done a bunch of podcasts. I have not listened to 5 minutes of a podcast, including my own. Yeah. It's mostly younger people, right? So we found out that there's all these younger people, listening to the podcast, watching the show. And that's kind of why we started doing it. It's all over the world with streaming. So many more people now, watch The Sopranos than did back then. Back then, only 11 million people had it. Now it's literally all over the world. I think the reason is, I think the show holds up. It's about a family. Yes, it's about mob and all that, but it's about a family and all the problems a family go through. Granted, not everybody's father is a murderer, but the show is much deeper and it's very smart. And I think younger people are smarter now than when I was younger. Honestly.
That's true, Grandma?
Yeah, well, no, I think that the writing on the show was fabulous. I mean, each individual storyline was terrific between not only Tony with the psychiatry. 15 years ago, not everybody talked about it like now everybody analyzes every relationship. You were so far ahead of the curve
on that show. And I think that resonates with young people today. And plus, everything is on the telephone today and on streaming. So, when we watched it, it had to be on HBO or on regular television. I don't think half the kids watch regular television anymore. So it's a different viewership, as you were saying, Steve. I think your show was so far ahead of everybody else's. It was just an amazing, iconic moment in television history.
It opened up the door for all of these great shows now.
Yeah.
Breaking Bad and The Walking Dead and all of these shows that have come after it.
So do you think the show could be written in 2021? Because there are some people who say like it's not politically correct, some parts of it.
I think it could be written. I don't know if anyone will air it.
Yeah.
It's very politically incorrect, but that's how these guys are, These guys were homophobic. These guys were, not anti-women, but, women were second-class citizens, It's a whole, they were racist, So I don't think anyone would make it today. Sometimes when I'm watching it, I cringe, you cringe a little.
Yeah.
But that's what these guys are. That's what that world is,
So do you remember the moment when you were first casted to be on the show?
Yeah. I had worked a regular job, I lived in Las Vegas. I was born in Brooklyn. I graduated Brooklyn College and I moved to Las Vegas. My mother's Jewish, so I played basketball in college and I tried out for a team in Israel, and I made the team, and then they wanted me to work on a kibbutz.
Oh my gosh.
And that didn't sound great. So it was work on a kibbutz, go to Las Vegas. And I chose Las Vegas. And that's where I met my wife, and that's where my wife was born and my kids were born. And I was an executive in one of the hotels for many years. And I started working with entertainers. And they asked me to be in some of their sketches and HBO specials, little things. And I was just dabbling. It was fun to me. It was a hobby. I had a good job. I was making money. I was, no aspirations of quitting and, becoming an actor. And then I started getting more and more bit parts. And I started taking some classes. And I came to New York for a wedding, and I auditioned for The Sopranos, and I got the role.
Oh wow.
So the first year, I flew myself back and forth on my own dime. It cost me $24,000, and I made $22,000. I made no money. My agent at the time said, "Don't take it. They're not going to fly you. They're not going to put you up." But I took a chance and invested in myself. By this time, I wanted to become an actor. I had gotten the bug, by now, and it was my wife who pushed me. And to be honest, most wives wouldn't have, I think, because we had a nice life, 2 kids. I was 40 years old. It's like, well, where the hell are you going? Where are we going? We have a big house in Las Vegas. We knew everybody and lived a really nice life. And she was the one that said, let's try.
Good for her. Good for
She
her.
believed in you. That's such a nice quality.
Yeah, very
And
much.
we loved seeing you all these years. So she was so right.
Is there anything you've learned rewatching the show that kind of surprised you, or a takeaway that you got this time around where you might have not gotten it the first time you watched?
The biggest thing for me, well, one, I knew it was funny, but now it's laugh out loud funny to me. There's some of the things so funny, but the thing that I didn't understand, the Melfi stuff, the psychiatry stuff bored me. But now that I'm 20 something years older, I understand it a lot more. And it's one of my favorite parts of the show.
Yeah. Mine
You
too.
know? And like you said, there was a stigma,
Right.
15 years ago, 20 years ago about that. I think it's so much better. There still needs work. It still needs work. But back then, going to the doctor's office and sitting there, now you could do it online. You can do it on the phone. And I think it's so much better for people.
Yeah. So with your book, Woke Up This Morning, what was that process like writing the book, and what might a Sopranos fan learn in the book that they wouldn't have known just watching the show?
This is my seventh book. I had a New York Times bestseller in 2002. And we just hit the New York Times bestseller list.
Congrats.
Congratulations. That's
Number
great.
6. Yeah, number 6. We started the podcast. We were approached to do one a few months before COVID. And we said, okay, we agreed to do it, me and Michael. We didn't know what we were doing. We had no idea, no plan, no nothing. We did a bunch of press, and then COVID hit. And then we said, well, we're supposed to start the podcast. And it was like, well, who gives a crap about a podcast now? The world's coming to an end. Does it really matter, a TV show? I mean, we honestly felt that way. People were horrified, as we were. Michael was stuck in California, and I was here in New York in my apartment. And we started hearing from the fans, we really need this. We're binging the show. Where's the podcast? Where's the podcast? So we took a shot, and, we found Zoom, which I don't think, did anyone know about Zoom before?
That was definitely a COVID
I mean, I knew
product.
about it.
Yeah, but none of us, we really didn't. I was in New York too during COVID. So I know we lived to really go on this Zoom. That was the whole thing, with our sweatpants and without our sweatpants. That was the whole year of sitting there.
It's terrible. Yeah. I mean, I was in the apartment 23 hours a day. I mean, I went out for a walk.
For a walk.
So we started doing it, and, people liked it. And, we have about 250,000 people an episode.
Wow.
And we had so many stories. We interviewed 67 people for the book. We had a lot of guests, directors, actors, writers. And so there was so much material, we decided to do the book. And it came out November 2nd. And we hit the bestsellers list. And it was a long, grueling, it's very difficult to write a book. It took us a long
write it
time.
alone, or did you have a
It was me,
someone?
Michael, and we had help, Phil Lerman,
Right.
who I did my last book. My last book was Big Daddy's Rules. Raising Daughters is Tougher Than I Look. It was about a comedic look at raising two daughters. So, that's it. I'm very happy because at least people are liking the book. A lot of people are buying the book. I'm happy that, when you do something, it's not about money, honestly.
Not at this point.
Unless you need money. But it's like, you know what? I did this movie. Like this movie was based on a book that I wrote. And it was a movie for Nickelodeon. And all I want is people to see the movie because it's a good movie. But you don't always get that chance, for whatever reason.
Mickey Deuce is the name of the movie, just for the people who are listening to the
It's
podcast.
called Nicky Deuce.
Right.
Deuce. And there's James Gandolfini is in it. And there's about 4 Sopranos. Rita Moreno plays my mother. And it's a really good kids movie. But unfortunately, when they put it out, they didn't promote it, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's disappointing when you put something out that's pretty good and people don't see it. So I'm glad people are reading the book, enjoying the book,
Great.
So speaking of your two daughters, how have they responded to your fame, especially now that a new generation is watching? And have they actually watched the show?
They didn't watch it growing up at all. And they didn't, I don't want it to sound, they didn't care that I was semi-famous. They could care less, and my daughter, they don't tell people. So unless people find out on their own, they have the same last name as me. They're not those kids that do that, I don't want to, of course, they're very proud of me, and my younger daughter was home at the time. She helped with the podcast, setting up the camera and all that stuff that I know nothing about, right? But as far as caring too much about show business, they don't care.
So they're not,
I'm
neither
glad
one
they
are in
don't
the
care.
field. They're not in that, in
the
this
industry.
field.
Oh, no. And I'm happy about that. I wouldn't want them to be, listen, I wouldn't discourage. If that's what you want to try, hey, let's try it. But it's very, very disheartening. It's very, very hard. Not impossible, but it's hard. Even now I've worked steady for 22 years, and it is, and I've made a great living, and I've done well, but it's hard,
Right.
and you're constantly getting punched around, and on every level that is, right?
Mhm.
Like on every level, like even I had read a thing once, Tim Allen and Robin Williams, they did Flubber. Remember the movie Flubber?
Loved that
You
movie.
loved it.
Yeah. So Robin Williams, I think, got the movie. Tim Allen, they were both huge stars, but Robin Williams beat him out, and Tim Allen was mortified. So even
Right.
up
Top
here,
of the top. Yeah.
I mean, so I think that just constantly happens,
Mhm.
and you have to have a really thick skin. And like I said, if they would wanted to try, I just wouldn't want them to be disappointed. Hey, for young people out there, you want to try it, but do it the right way. Don't get a headshot and say, I'm an actor.
Right.
Go to class, do your work.
Are there
Go to
classes in New York that you would recommend to people?
There's a I just heard about someone. I worked with an acting coach
Mhm.
all through The Sopranos, and so do a lot of big actors. That's like a little dirty little secret people don't want you to know, except for like Al Pacino's worked with someone for years, and Meryl Streep does.
Mhm.
I worked with a guy named Richard Scanlon for 8 years on The Sopranos, and he was a big help to me. And then I worked with Joanna Bexon. You know, uh, there is a guy, Bob Krakauer, who I think is a great acting coach here in New York City, and Maggie Flanagan. And if you're starting out, HB Studios is a good beginners kind of thing, and you feel your way around. Also, acting, it's not one size fits all. It's kind of like therapy. Like this therapist, well, that ain't for me. I mean, and it's the same thing with an acting coach. They have different styles.
Mhm.
Some of them yell and scream. That's not for me.
Right.
You
A lot of
know,
different methods. I did William Esper.
how was that?
Yeah. I liked it. It was all Meisner technique, so I don't know if that was really my thing, but I moved
Yeah,
on from
yeah.
acting. But I mean, it's amazing. It was just I don't think that the disappointment was necessarily for me. But this
No.
industry is hard too, being in media and entertainment in general. So
Well, the only thing with the podcast stuff and other stuff. Listen, I'm good friends with Joe Rogan.
mhm.
He's got the biggest
Oh
podcast in
my
the
gosh.
world.
Yes,
Yeah,
certainly
number
has.
one.
Now, Joe used to work for me in Vegas as a stand-up comic, and I've done his podcast
Yeah, I
twice.
listened to your episode with him.
So here's Joe, who's a comic and successful, but this podcast, he kind of got in, not at the very beginning, but early on, and he did it for no money for 3 years, didn't make a dollar. And he did it, he talked to his friends and worked things out, and suddenly, Spotify is paying him, $100 million or hundreds of millions of dollars, right?
Mhm.
The thing is, nowadays with the technology, you have more independence. You don't have to rely so much on other people.
For sure.
You know, you,
And
you
it
know,
was,
like me, if I go out to audition, there's 25 people weighing in.
mhm.
I mean, as opposed to saying, you know what, you're going to do your own thing, and maybe someday you'll hit the street and do your own show.
Yeah, that's such a good point. You have control of whether you get seen or not versus in acting, you really don't have that opportunity. Except now, I guess, like you can film your own stuff and put it on YouTube and you never know how that'll go. But that's not obviously being in a film or television.
But I think especially with the broadcasting stuff. I mean, you could go hit the street with a film crew and do your thing and be a correspondent and talk about what you want and go to different restaurants or bars or nightlife or whatever you're interested in.
We
And
do it.
On TikTok.
We do it.
right, so so that's something that didn't exist. So you're not so dependent.
Mhm.
So that's a good thing.
So switching gears a little bit, since we are a dating podcast, have you given your two daughters any advice about dating or relationships throughout the years?
They didn't bring that many guys home.
Okay.
Like over the years. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, like I have some friends like like it's like, well, my daughter's got a new boyfriend, new boyfriend, new
Yeah.
boyfriend. The guy, she had like 14 new boyfriends in a year.
Yeah.
You know.
Sounds
So
familiar, Kim.
Rude.
it wasn't that. they brought a few home, and I watch. I'm a little. I'm very old school. I still have a flip phone.
Oh
You know.
no, you were
My dad has a BlackBerry, so it's the
There you
same.
go. So I'm a little behind him, but there you go, right? So, but I would watch like little red flags, like what a guy would do. You're gonna come over the house. You're gonna do it the right way. You're not gonna go outside. You're not gonna honk the horn, and you're coming down, and I don't meet them, and all that
You
kind of
want to
stuff.
shake their hand and have them
I want them
introduce.
to look me in the eye.
Wow.
yes, that's the right way of
Shake
doing
their
it.
hand, and I want to look them in the eye, and I'm going to say, "You make sure you take care of my daughter. Go have fun, but you take care of my daughter." And I could tell right from that, Now, my daughter got married during COVID. The 29-year-old, a nice guy. They've been together about 4 years. They were living together. My younger one has been with a guy 5.5 years.
Oh, that's a
Wow.
long time.
I'm assuming soon.
Might be a ring in the future.
I would assume he's a nice kid. They're both good guys. They both came to me. They live with them, with my daughters. They both came and asked permission,
That's very nice.
and I thought that was a certainly a feather in their cap. They asked permission. I'd like to move in with your daughter, and I said, "Is it just to split the rent, or do you really care for her?"
And they gave you the right answer.
One of the guys was a nervous wreck. I said, "Pull yourself together, man." So I think that's important. And when he came time to give my daughter a ring, he came to see me first.
Okay.
Very respectful. I don't go. I was always respectful to any girl that I dated. Very respectful. And I was to their parents especially. And if they're not going to be respectful to me, they're certainly not going to be respectful to my daughter.
Right.
Correct.
So there's little things, and for you girls out there, don't let stuff slide. Look for the red flags. I'm not saying to nitpick, but he should have held that door open for me and said he was going to pick me up at 8, but it's already 8:45 and I haven't heard from him.
Yeah, goodbye.
So how many of these things should you let pass? Like 0, or do you give somebody?
Oh, I don't, I'll give, listen, we can't be that hard-assed. There's an explanation, but you can't give too many.
Right.
I mean, come on, now you're being disrespectful. Just like no different than a regular friend. Forget boyfriend. My friend said we're going to go out Thursday, but I'm waiting. I got plans, and then she called at 6 and she can't make it. Well, that's wrong.
Right, that's
Totally.
rude.
I think we let our romantic partners get away with a lot more than our friends and family.
Well,
And it
maybe this
should be.
generation.
Well,
we
yeah.
didn't let them get away with it.
Yeah, you should, and you shouldn't, honestly. And that's the one thing, that I had taught them. And even now, listen, they come to my wife more than me for advice, obviously.
Okay.
But we were talking yesterday, me and my daughter, and, she was about, getting married. I said, you're still young and
Yeah.
don't push too much and see what happens. And you don't want to force anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
It has to be the right time.
Mhm. Did you ever get advice from your parents or your grandparents? Since I get so much advice from my grandma.
Well, you see, your grandmother is much different than mine was and much smarter.
No, I
And
don't think so.
back then, and I'm way older, but my father, I got absolutely no advice ever about anything. Seriously.
Okay.
We didn't have a great relationship. My mother, if I needed to, I would go to her, but how much can you talk to your mom? Back then you went to older friends, people you knew, your coach. I was in college, you're talking to, like back then I'm 19, I'm talking to a guy that's 26, like what he knows. You
What
know
does
what I
he
mean?
know? He didn't know anything either.
He didn't know anything either. But I did not get parents, and I know everyone, you'll see as you get older how right your grandmother is.
I'm realizing more and more, but there's still some things that I feel like I know more.
But
I
when
know.
did you get married, Steve? How old were you?
I was almost 32. I was
Oh, so
31.
you were older. Okay.
I wouldn't have been married, honestly, because I was living in Vegas and
Right.
I was enjoyed every second of that.
Think of that.
I was a bouncer at Paul Anka's nightclub.
Oh my
Mhm.
gosh.
So I enjoyed every moment of being out all night, coming home at 11 a.m. and going to sleep and doing it again.
But they did in Vegas.
So if I would have got married any younger, it wouldn't have been good. But I had, two or three serious relationships before that, uh, and I think that helped me. A lot of my friends got married really young,
Right.
like really, really young. That wouldn't have worked for me. I wanted to get out of Brooklyn and see the world a little and see what goes on and meet other people, and that kind of thing.
But
Yeah.
you did it.
Also, I feel that in the Sopranos, relationships were pretty traditional as well. Do you think that, there were stereotypes, American Italian kind of stereotypes with having like a mistress? Is it called a
Gumata.
okay? So
Gumata.
is that a real thing?
Oh, that's a real thing.
Mhm.
There used to be, I think it was Friday nights were for the Gumatas
Oh my God.
and Saturday nights for the wives. Now, uh,
It might still be happening today, I'm sure.
I
in
believe it
everybody's culture.
probably, I would almost bet on it.
I would too.
A lot of the wives knew and put up with it.
Right.
I remember a friend of mine had a girlfriend. He was an Italian guy from Rhode Island, and his wife caught him, and they broke up. I'll tell you a real quick story. It's horrifying to me. So he's seeing this girl on the side. He's married. He's got a couple of kids. He's seeing this girl. He's falling in love with her, right? So she says, "I'm going to leave my husband. You leave your wife. Enough of this." He agrees. Well, he goes home and he can't do it.
Oh no.
He can't do it. She goes and tells her husband.
Now he's got troubles.
Okay, a week goes by. He comes home. The girlfriend, the Gumata, is in the living room talking to the wife.
No.
Well,
I said to him, if that was me, I would have ran out of the house. I would have gotten the car and I would have I don't even know where I would have gone.
go to Colorado.
Exactly. And she said, and I knew her, and they had broke up for like a month. And then she said, my grandfather had a mistress and my mother had, my father had a mistress, and I guess I'll just have one too. And I don't agree with it. It's never been my thing, but that exists.
Right. Okay, good to know. So I want to end the episode quickly with Grandma Gail's old-fashioned dating quiz. So I'm just going to run down
Well,
through.
we know some of the
We know
answers
some
now.
now because we've talked that you're a bit traditional, but we'll go through a few quick things and you can tell me which you would rather do, and then we will deem whether you are an old-fashioned dater or a modern dater.
Okay.
So would you rather call or text someone that you are
Call.
dating? Okay. Would you ever sleep with someone on the first date?
Yes.
Okay. Dating apps or setups?
Setup. No dating app. No.
I'm team dating app. Would you
Even
move?
if I was single.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And you know what? Another thing, not to interrupt, but
Yeah.
when my daughters were like younger and they lived at home with us, I would go, stop texting. Call your friend. Call her. Talk to her. And when I was young, your mother and father would get mad at you for being on the phone. Completely opposite.
Would you move in together before getting engaged or wait until you're engaged to move in?
Before I lived with my wife, we lived together before we got married. I'm a big believer in that, and I know that even though I'm old-fashioned, I think you really got to know each other because you got to live with someone, whether it be your best friend. A lot of times, your best friend growing up together, you move in together, you wind up hating each other.
Yeah, so true.
So I'm a big believer in that.
Trial.
But when they come to my house, and this is very contradictory, I have, if they stay at my apartment or I have a house in California, they can't sleep in the same room.
Ah.
Not under my roof.
Yeah, my parents are like that too. Okay, last one. Should the man pay for the date?
I do. I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah. I pay for the dates. I'm like that. Even if it's a girl that's just a friend,
Right.
I'll still pay. I mean, I've always been that guy, you know.
Mhm.
He's my kind of guy. It's all traditional.
Yeah. So 3 out of 5 traditional. So you are an old-fashioned dater, Steve
I'm an
Schirripa.
old-fashioned
Thank you
dater.
very much.
Why, do you pay for the guys when you go out?
No, but sometimes like in my relationships I'll alternate if we order in together. Some guys I've dated have wanted to split. It really depends.
And listen, I could see if they don't have money, if they're
Yeah.
just starting out. You guys are young. So if a guy is not doing all that well, and hey man, I can't afford to take you out to a $200 dinner, twice a week. I
Right.
get that part.
Mhm.
But I'm a believer in paying.
Yeah.
I mean, go to a diner, get pizza, go to Chipotle, whatever. I mean, you don't start going out to, big meals. I mean, I was a kid. I didn't have money. I grew up on welfare. I had no money at all. I know a guy so cheap. He's older,
Mhm.
and he would set up 4 or 5 dates on the dating app and meet them at different Starbucks because he didn't want to buy them dinner. So he would figure he'll go for a cup of coffee.
Mhm. No, a lot of my guy friends now they'll say I don't want to put in and pay for dinner if I'm never going to see the girl again, so they'll do drinks the
And
first
I
time.
get that. Yeah, I would rather, I would rather meet somebody for a drink than sit down and I gotta go. Oh, I gotta spend an hour and a half with this
Right.
person.
I do
Usually you usually know 10 minutes, 15 minutes if the guy or girl is somebody you're gonna like.
100%. I do think it's a power move though on the first date for someone to say, "Let's go to dinner." I'm like, okay, I know that you are into me already off the bat if they're asking that. I don't know.
Very
That's
complicated.
it
Very
is. No, you're always
Dating is very complicated
You're
today.
making it very complicated already. Maybe sometimes it is what it is.
Right.
He wants to spend time with you. Let's go to dinner.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Exactly.
He
Very
doesn't have to be taking you to,
No.
Nobu,
totally.
right?
Yeah, you're right.
Go to John's Pizza on Bleecker Street.
You're the
my
same
favorite.
person. She says
I
the
am.
same
I'm the same
thing.
person. That's all you do.
So funny.
Thank you.
Steve, thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
It was
Where can
great
people
talking.
follow you and listen to the podcast and get your book?
TalkingSopranos.com. You could go any Barnes and Noble. They have Signs books. Amazon.com. All that kind of stuff.
That was such a fun conversation with Steve. I feel like if he was my dad and I was dating someone, they would be so scared to go and talk to him because I feel like he's such a tough guy. Even though he is a teddy bear, I feel like he's intimidating.
Yeah. Meanwhile, his 2 daughters have one's recently gotten married, as he said, and one is in a relationship. And he and his wife seem to have a very good relationship. And he's probably a big teddy bear at home.
Yeah, it's interesting to me how he is traditional and wants, someone to come and shake his hand when picking their daughters up. Like that's not that common nowadays.
Well, it should be.
1950s movie of the week.
What have we got?
Have to do a mob movie, obviously. Money from Home, 1953. That's Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis.
2 icons of when I was growing up. So this is really going back in time, but they were the best.
Yeah, it's basically a mob movie about fixing a racing horse to pay off their debts.
And silly and fun and an enjoyable watch. So everybody watch it and have a good time.
Another great episode of Excuse My Grandma. You know how to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Excuse My Grandma. DM me your questions. We can answer them on our next episode. And have a great week.